to trust Him more. Oh, I've seen His faithful hand all throughout my life. I recall His goodness to mine, His faithfulness and kindness. Oh, I can't deny it. And I've never seen the righteous forsaken. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. So I recall His faithfulness to mine, because He's come through every single time. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. So I recall His faithfulness to mine, because He's come through every single time. So on Jesus I will fix my eyes. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. And the things of this earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus and to take Him at His word, just to rest upon His promise and to know thus saith the Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I've proved Him o'er and trust Him more. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I have proved Him more and more. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more. Oh, for grace to trust Him more. Oh, I've seen His faithful hand all throughout my life. I recall His goodness to mind, His faithfulness and kindness. Oh, I can't deny it. And I've never seen the righteous forsaken. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. So I recall His faithfulness to mind, because He's come through every single time. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. So I recall His faithfulness to mind, because He's come through every single time. So on Jesus I will fix my eyes. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. And the things of this earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Tis so sweet to trust in is the Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I've proved Him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I have proved Him more and more. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more. Oh, for grace to trust Him more. Oh, I've seen His faithful hand all throughout my life. I recall His goodness to mind, His faithfulness and kindness. Oh, I can't deny it. And I've never seen the righteous forsaken. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. So I recall His faithfulness to mind, because He's come through every single time. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. No, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. So I recall His faithfulness to mind, because He's come through every single time. So on Jesus I will fix my eyes. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face.
We'll go ahead and get into the lesson this morning. I want to wish everybody a happy late Valentine's Day. I'm a little bit behind, but that's all right. I hope everybody had a good, enjoyable Valentine's Day. And if not, then there's always next year, right? We're looking at 1 Corinthians. And as you know, Paul established this church in Corinth. And this was a city that was absolutely destroyed, decimated by Rome. And it stayed decimated for about 100 years. And then Rome built it back the way that Rome wanted it built back. Paul spent about 1.5 years in Corinth, and he established a church there. And about 54 A.D., he found a need to write back to this church that he had established, because some things had come to his attention that they were doing some stuff that was just absolutely unheard of in a church. And he addressed them on it. He talked in the first 4 chapters about divisions in the church, how the church had divisions among itself, and there was this sect and that sect, and he fussed at them for that. In chapters 5 through 7, he talked to them about some of the sexual sins that were prevalent in the church. And he addressed some of those things. Things like a man living with his mother-in-law. His stepmother. A man living with his stepmother in a marital sense. And how that was not only accepted by the church, but embraced by it. And Paul was calling them out on that. He said that was some of the things that the heathens wouldn't do that was going on in the church at that time in Corinth. In chapters 8 through 10, he talked to them about some of the food things, some of the some of the food that was sacrificed to idols, and how it was causing some of the weaker in the faith to stumble by people eating that. So he addressed that. All the rest of the way, he was talking about fixing doctrinal issues and things that were askew in their doctrine. So chapters 15 to all the way down into 15 and 16, he was talking about fixing their doctrinal issues. Now we're picking up in chapter 9, and we're looking at Paul talking to them about the first part of chapter 9. We pick up about halfway through it. The first part of chapter 9, Paul was talking about how he and others who, missionaries and preachers, how they earned the support from the churches. How it was only right that the churches would support them that were ministering to them. That they should support those that minister to them. But then he turns around and he says, "But I have asked you for nothing. I have not preached to you for pay. I have not asked you for a house. All I have done is brought God's word to you, and that is my reward." And we pick up right here in chapter 9 on verse 16. Paul had just told them, "I have not asked you for anything, although I have every right to do so." He picks up in verse 16 and he says, "For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. For necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel." Hey girl, come on in here. Paul is telling them that I am preaching the gospel because I have to. It's almost like there's a fire in me where I have to preach. If I don't preach, my head's going to pop, basically is what he was saying. It wasn't a choice. Paul did not make a career choice to be a missionary. People today, and I'm sure you think hard enough, if you think just a little bit, you can probably think of people who have gone into a type of ministry as a profession. And they chose it because you can make a little money preaching. And if you think about that, we just have come through a time of seeking a pastor, right? And some of the pastors that we spoke to, and I say this almost to their shame, were not interested in coming here because we didn't pay enough. They were not interested in coming here because they've earned a doctorate degree, and by now they deserve to have $80,000 a year. And they've earned it. Well, I can't argue that. You know, you go to college, you got to pay that debt off. But their profession in life was preaching. And their profession, by that I mean the way that they paid the bills was preaching. Now, Paul was saying, that ain't me. Paul could have very well said, that was me, I was a Pharisee. But now, I have been taken from that, and that would have been a pretty lucrative existence. You know, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they had it pretty good. They got the front seats at all of the big events. They got the bows in the crowd when they had walked through the marketplace. They would kind of walk around and say, "Oh, that's a very nice looking apple right there," and the vendor would usually give it to them, you know, just as a thing. Paul could have had it good, but he was called. See, Paul was called. There's people who preach, and there's people who are called to preach, and you can tell the difference. If you've ever sat and listened to a preacher, and you just wonder, how in the world did that man ever become a preacher? And then there's folks that you listen to and you think, oh yes, that man is on fire for God. There's a difference, isn't there? And Paul was saying, it's not that I want to preach. I don't have a choice. He says here, it's necessity. It's laid upon me. God called me. Where it says, I have nothing to glory of, that's boasting. I'm not boasting, says Paul. I'm not here to boast. I'm not here to tell you, look at all the great things that Paul has done. Paul had it right. Everything that he did pointed to God. And everything that he was telling the Corinthians was to get them to point to God instead of pointing to themselves. See, he was saying, woe to me if I don't preach. I am miserable if I don't get to preach. You ever been there, preacher? You ever been to a point where you just got to preach somewhere, right? That was Paul. He was not content. Content's not even the right word. He could not be at peace unless he was preaching Jesus Christ. See, Paul had a lot to make up for. Paul used to be called Saul. When he was a Pharisee, he was called Saul. And I don't know if you remember or not, but Saul was not a very nice guy. Saul was one of these self-appointed saviors of the faith. Did you ever meet any of them? I've met a few of them. They're self-appointed saviors of the faith. Everybody else is doing it wrong. You got to do it my way, or you're just wrong. You're just wrong. You're stupid. You're ignorant. You're unlearned. You don't know what you're talking about. See, that was Saul. Saul was that way to such a degree that he went to the Sanhedrin and he convinced them to let him have authority to go out and persecute these new Christians that were taking away from the Jewish faith. These guys that were just stealing our congregation and following this person named Jesus. Paul took it to such a place where he not only... See, now Paul was smart about it. He was political. Saul was political as well. At the stoning of Stephen, Saul didn't throw no stones. He didn't get his hands bloody, you see. He didn't kill Stephen, but he enabled it to happen, see. He even took the coats of the men that were throwing the stones. See, when you throw a stone, I don't want you to think of a little... When you think of a stoning, I don't want you to think of somebody being covered up with these pretty little round river rocks until they die. That ain't what happened, guys. When you were stoned to death, people took shards of granite, rocks. Think of the roughest, ugliest, chunkiest thing that you could find and throwed at them. Bones were broken, teeth knocked out. This was not a pretty way to die. You were literally beaten to death with rugged rocks. And it didn't happen quick. You didn't get one good lick to the head and then you're down. It took a minute. And every time it hurt. Saul was okay with that. He said, here, let me hold your coats so you don't get no blood on them, you see. Saul was okay with that. Saul had a lot to make up for in his life. He had a lot to make up for. You know, as we look back on our life, we can say, God, I don't know why you chose somebody like me to carry your word. But with every ounce of energy that I used before to do the bad things, I want to use double that to do the good things. I want to please you twice as much as I rebelled against you. So he said, if I do not preach, woe unto me. I am miserable if I don't preach. Going on 17. For this I do, let me try that again. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. He's saying if I am paid to do this, if I do it because I want to do it, it's a pretty easy living to be a preacher. If I do it for that reason, then I get paid. I get my reward. You pay me if I tell you what you want to hear. He goes on to say, but if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. If I do it for money, I get paid, and that's what I get. But if I do it because God has commissioned me, God has called me, God has laid it on my heart and on my mind, and He will just not leave me alone until I do this. You remember the conversion of Saul on the road to Damascus. That was not something that he could overlook. That was not something that old Saul could say, well, maybe I didn't see Jesus there. Maybe Jesus didn't talk to me. Took him a few days to be able to see anything, didn't it? And it took the very people he was going to go kill to pray for him before he could. A dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. What is the gospel that he was talking about? It means literally, gospel means good news. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul goes on to say here a little bit later, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel which I preached unto you. This is what the gospel is, he said, which you have also received, and wherein you stand, by which you are saved, if you keep in memory what I preached unto you, unless you have believed in vain. That was rhetorical. For I have delivered unto you, first of all, that which I also received. How that Christ died for our sins. There's your gospel. Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that He was buried and that He rose again on the third day according to the Scriptures. That's the good news. That's the gospel. That Christ fulfilled all of the prophecies about the Messiah. The Messiah is here. The good news. You should be happy about this. That's what he was telling him. This is the good stuff. How could he be quiet about that? How could he not be excited to preach that? You see, the Corinthians were very arrogant people. They were very proud. They had a little money. They were very proud people. They were arrogant, in fact. They were boastful, even. Sometimes it would almost seem like they were boasting about the sinfulness in the church. And we're not talking about the sinfulness of Corinth, because that had its own things going on there with all the small g gods that they worshipped. But Paul claimed that he had nothing to boast about. Paul was saying, I'm not bragging here. I'm not bragging. This is not me glorifying myself. I have nothing to glory of. I have nothing to brag about. I just need to tell you what Jesus did. I need to tell you the gospel, the good news. Paul was compelled to preach, see, by Jesus Himself. Jesus that converted him from Saul, the terrifying, aggressive, mean, ugly, boo-boo dude, to Saul, who brought not only to the Jews the good news of Jesus as the Messiah, but to the Gentiles who never were Jews, who never did think in the Jewish mind, how that Christ also died for them, so that they could be saved from the sins. It wasn't just a Jewish thing. It was an everybody thing, and I'm so glad for that. He was called to preach from a place of antithesis, I'm not saying that word right, anti-gospel. He was anti-gospel as Saul, and Jesus took him to be one of His major preachers. Now, if He can do that with somebody as dirty and rotten as old Saul, He can do that with you. It wasn't by choice that Paul preached, you see. It was necessary for him to do that. He couldn't do anything else. He'd be miserable if he didn't preach. It was a fire from God, not money, that drove Paul to preach. Let's look on what he says here in verse 18. He says, "What is my reward then?" So why do I do it? "Truly, verily, that when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not my power in the gospel." Don't get confused with those words. He's saying that my payment is not being paid. My reward is not money. It's the fact that I can preach the gospel without worrying about pleasing man. If you pay me to preach, then you kind of expect me to preach the way you want me to. If you pay me to preach to you and I say something you don't like, I may not get paid. But if I go into it knowing that I am not getting paid to do this, that this is coming from God, then I don't owe you a thing but the truth. And that's what he laid out on him. He gave him the truth, that I abuse not my power in the gospel. Well, now, preacher, don't say it just like that. You can say it a little bit different. You can still make your point to them that want to hear it and not alienate the others. That's not Paul. Paul said, this is what God says. This is the good news. And he goes on over here. Let's jump over to our next little scriptures. Still in Corinthians 9, going 19 to 23. And he starts out here speaking in terms that a Roman would understand. "For though I be free from all man, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more." Now, Paul was a Roman. He was a Jew, but he was a Roman. And Romans had slaves. They had servants. They had people who took care of their needs. And it was just an expected thing. A lot of Roman citizens were slaves. They were. They were sold into slavery. They sold themselves into slavery. They became slaves because of debt, different things. But Paul proclaimed, "I am a free man. Don't no man have any sway over me." And that was something to be said in those days. It really was. To be a free man, beholding to nobody. But Paul could claim that. "Yet," he said, "have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more." Now, he's not saying that he put himself under subjection to man. What he's saying here is that he tries to reach the people in ways that they understand. He appeals to what they know. He goes on to say, "Unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews." He knows how to talk to the Jews. He was a Pharisee. He got the religious talk. He understood what the symbolism of the things in the temple were. He understood what the feast were all about. And he could relate Jesus to the prophecies that they studied. He could show them, "You are looking for a Messiah. What are you looking for? Let's look at the scriptures." Well, that's all Jesus. You see, he could do that. He goes on to say, "To them that are under the law," that's the Jews, "as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law." Under the law is the law of Moses. He's talking about the Jews here, as we know. And 21, "To them that are without the law, as without law." Those that are without the law are the Gentiles. It's the law of Moses. He's not talking about a bunch of lawless bandits running around. He's talking about the Gentiles who don't know any better. Okay? "To them that are without law, as without law." He's saying, I can reach them by using what they understand. But he goes on to clarify, being not without law to God, but under the law of Christ. Now, Paul did not say, in order to reach the drunkard, I'm going to go get drunk with him. Paul did not say, in order to reach the sexually impure, I'm going to go do that stuff too, so that I can talk to them in a way they understand. No. And we'll see here later on that Paul was very strict with his body, and very strict with his mind, and very strict with his entire life. What he was talking about was, I can appeal to them what they are looking for in their lifestyle. I can show them how Jesus can give them that. If they're looking for satisfaction, I can show them how to find that in Jesus. If they're looking for direction, I can show them how to find that in Jesus. The gospel, the good news, is to all man, and I can show them that. And he goes on here in 21, that I may gain them that are without the law. He talks to the Gentiles in a way the Gentiles will understand, so that he can convince them of the gospel. 22, he says, to the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. Now, who is the weak? The weak is the younger proselytes, perhaps, those who are not as mature in their faith, those that have just accepted Christianity and are trying to make the change from being worshipers of Poseidon to now claiming Jesus Christ as their Savior. How does that translate? He's trying to help them. Goes on to say, I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Paul is willing to address people where they are. Now, for a Pharisee at heart, not at heart, but in his mind, the Pharisee in Paul would have to overcome a whole bunch of before he could do some stuff. The Pharisee would say, I'm not even going to sit with the sinners. I'm not even going to look at the sinners. I am not going to eat food with the sinners. I ain't even going to touch them, because then I'm unclean. He had to overcome all that. He had 20-some years of that beaten into him in the rabbinical schools. That was his default, if you will. He had to overcome that, but he was willing. I found a paraphrase of these 3 or 4 verses here, and I want to read it to you because it kind of sets it into a language that I understood better, and maybe it'll hit somebody there as well. 19 to 23 here. Paul sets forth his understanding of the exercise of this freedom on behalf of others. He speaks of the exercise of his freedom in reference to himself. Again, he's using the first person to speak of himself, and this is what it could sound like. For though I am free from all men, since God has made me a truly free man by emancipating me from the slavery to sin, I have made myself a slave to all. When I call myself a slave to men, I mean that I strive to be a servant to all men. I do not mean that I permit all men to control my life. Did you hear that? I am a servant to all men. I do not permit men to control my life. Only God does that through Christ. I make myself a slave or a servant in order to win more and introduce them to salvation. My outlook means practically that to the Jew, I become as a Jew in order to win Jews. I try to understand how the Jew would regard a Jew who preaches that Jesus is the Messiah. How would they receive me? He thinks about that. I undertake to empathize with them. I have the advantage of having possessed the same legal attitude toward the law of Moses that any other Jew possesses. I don't mean by my becoming a Jew that I am a Christian legalist. I mean that I try to place myself alongside the Jew to win the Jew. And I look at Christianity from the vantage point of Judaism. Judaism is good. How can Christianity as a Jew be even better? There are times when I keep the Jewish law myself, but I no longer live by the law in an effort to earn salvation. See, there were times when Paul said, if eating meat offends your brothers, don't eat meat, right? If it causes your brother to stumble, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't let them see you do these things that would cause them to stumble, even though you're good with it. I knew a man one time that he was a smoker, and he would never smoke around the church. Just wouldn't do it. He said, because people look at this. They see me. They see my position. And I don't want to cause anybody to stumble. I don't have a problem with it. I'm okay with it. I don't see it as a sin, but somebody might. And I don't want to give them that illusion and cause them to stumble. So that's what he was saying here. I consider their outlook in life in order to lead them out of it. But I do not sacrifice my basic principle of the Christian gospel. I'm under no obligation to keep the law of Moses. I'm saved by grace through faith alone, period. But I do try to empathize with those who believe differently. I know that my salvation is secure, he's saying. But there are folks who do not understand that yet. And I have to show them that that's the case. To those outside the law, that's the Gentiles. When I started my mission work among them, I became as one outside the law. As one who strives to empathize with the Gentile interpretation of salvation and their commitment to various gods and lords. I don't mean that I ever became a Gentile as a lawless person with contempt for high moral principles. I am always under the law of Christ. And the law of Christ is one way that I express the centrality of love, which I mentioned in chapter 8, verse 1. When I began discussing the problem of food offered to idols, okay, that's where he was talking about in Romans 13. Let me direct your attention also to the weak, he says. I've made every effort to empathize with the weak. Some Jewish Christians are weak in regard to eating food sacrificed to idols because of their background. That is certainly true of some of the Gentiles, many of whom think that idols were real gods. He says, I know that the idols aren't real. So if you sacrifice something to them, it don't matter because you didn't sacrifice it really to anything. So I don't have a problem eating that stuff, he said. I've always tried to be considerate of persons like that who are spiritually immature. I have always tried to be considerate of persons like that who are spiritually immature. I've got to say that one more time. I have always tried to be considerate of people like that who are spiritually immature. I ain't got a problem with it, but it may cause somebody to stumble. And doesn't the Bible say, woe to him who causes one of the least of these to stumble? Wouldn't it be better to have a millstone tied around your neck, chucked into the depths of the ocean, than to cause one of these little ones to fall? I may not have a problem doing something. I may not have a problem drinking. I may think it's perfectly fine to have a glass of wine with supper. But if it causes one of the little ones to look at me and say, whoa, what's Tommy doing? Then I will not do that. Around them or not around them. Not only because it may cause them to fall, but because knowing that, if I do it anyway, then I'm declaring that I don't care. I don't care if it causes them to stumble. Maybe it's smoking. I don't know. Whatever it is. Maybe it's taking medicine. There are people who are new to the faith, or people who are old antiques in the faith, who say, oh, you can't take medicine, that's of the devil. Hey, I've heard it. Medicine is apothecary. And apothecary translates into witchcraft. And witchcraft is of the devil. See how that works? I have always tried, what was that I said ago? I've always tried to be considerate of persons like that who are spiritually immature. We're not wrestling against that person. I'm not trying to convince that person. I'm wrestling against the spirit of the Antichrist that is influencing that person. I've done it because Christian love requires me, can I say that again? I do this because Christian love requires me to interpret my freedoms in terms of sensitivity to others. To me, all things are lawful, but I won't be held under control of any of them. I can do all things. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But I won't do it if it's going to cause somebody to stumble. I just won't. You better not, because you're causing somebody to stumble. And if you... Have you ever... Let me just give you a little example, and then I'm going to move on. In my class at school, I've got 3 wrestlers, 3 of the girls that on the wrestling team. And every week, they have to make weight every Thursday. All right? Every Wednesday, guess what they don't eat? Lunch, or breakfast, or supper. Now, 2 of them are sisters. And one of the sisters has no trouble making weight. One of the sisters is right on weight every time. But that sister has to fast on Wednesday. The sister that doesn't have a problem making weight, they won't eat. Because it's tempting. What would her eating do to her sister? Nothing. It wouldn't help her. It doesn't help her to not eat. But it's a sign of solidarity with her, you see. It's an encouragement to her that, hey, you are not by yourself. That's what Paul was doing. He was saying, I understand that you don't want to eat that because it was sacrificed to some idol. I'm okay with not eating that. I don't have to eat that just to prove that I'm above it. I don't have to do these things just to prove that I can. My hope is that my compassion for those who are weak will help me win the weak by nurturing them in maturing faith. If we can take the weak, if we can take the young at faith, help them to mature, help them to grow, then when they get to the point where I am, we can sit down and have that meal together and not cause anybody to stumble. I want to make it perfectly clear, he says, that I have not become guilty of expediency. Situational morality is not what Paul was talking about. He wasn't saying get drunk with the drunkard. He was saying to reach the drunkard and show him what he really is after. Help him to ease the pain that he's trying to ease through the drink. Help the drug addict to fill that void that he's trying to fill so desperately with drugs. Show him that true fulfillment comes from Christ alone. Adaptation never involves surrender. My purpose is to understand the commitment of others. If I understand what they're committed to, then I can address them in terms that they understand. A Christian who loves others has the freedom to employ his love in ways that show that he really cares for others, enough to strive to understand and appreciate them. We're going to move on some more. That to me, that paraphrase to me kind of put 19 to 23 into an English language that I could understand. And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. I don't surrender to your way of thinking, but I empathize. I can understand what you're trying to do, and let me show you how Jesus can do that for you. Next page. We're looking still in 1 Corinthians, moving on to verse 24. Almost as if to demonstrate what he was talking about, Paul uses a reference that Corinth would understand. Corinth every 2 years was kind of, it's like us to Knoxville. If Knoxville every 2 years held a big sporting event, like the Olympics. There was actually 4 games during these times. There was the Olympics, the Isthmian Games. I wrote these down. The Isthm. Go ahead and say that for me. Isthmian. I don't know. Isthmian Games, the Olympian Games, the Pythian Games, and the Nemean Games. Okay, the Olympics is 4 years. So every other year, this one and this one, they would do the Isthmian Games, and that was second only to the Olympics. And then the other 4, it was like every year there was something, but the big ones were the Olympics and the Isthmian Games. So he's talking to them knowing a lot of their money comes from these games because it's really close. They're like the hotel places, and they come there, and it's just a happiness. You win, and you get this crown of pine or something, and you get it. There's no gold medals, but you get to wear the crown. You know, you get the winner's crown, and people pat you on the back and they say, "Good job." He's using this example to speak to them now. Know ye not that they which run a race run all, but one receiveth the prize. So run that you may obtain. Everybody who runs a race, they all run. They all try hard, even though only one wins. One wins. You should run to win. Nobody really wants to run to come in last place. Nobody really wants to run to make second place. There was no second place. There was no gold, silver, and bronze. It was like you win or you don't. You're the winner or the first loser. And that's the way that Paul was looking at this. He says, everybody runs. Run like you want to win. Every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. All of these athletes, and they were physical stuff, wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling, there was equestrian things. They even had music. You get band competitions. So it was really a big thing. And they did it to win. And they trained to win. And they did it for a crown of pine needles. Okay, that's a good way we can understand. What happens to a pine tree in a couple of years? It decays. It's gone. A couple of days, the needles start falling off. And, you know, if you ever had a live Christmas tree, you know, it don't take long for those needles to just fall all over the floor, and you've got a pretty little green carpet under the Christmas tree. They do it to obtain a corruptible crown. They do it for the recognition. But we do it for an incorruptible. But we an incorruptible. What is our incorruptible crown? Ultimately, presence of God. We get to live with Jesus Christ in the presence of God forever. And never grows old. It don't never rot and fall to the floor. You don't ever have to do it again and again and again. When we're done, and we're with God forever. Verse 26 goes on, and I like this. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly. So fight I, not as one that beateth the air. It always tickles me when the first time we take the cadets out to the track and say, okay, we're going to run a mile. That's 4 laps, okay? So pace yourself. You got to run a mile. And you got this, there's always at least 3. Soldiers the same way. Always at least 3. That first lap around the track, man, they're done in 1:05. And it's like, wow, that's a 5-minute lap, guys. Good job. And they get past the starting point and fall flat on their face. They are done. They're done. And then you've got those other folks that just kind of halfway walk, mall walking. You know, it ain't even like a granny walking, trying to get to that aisle that they're after, that frying pan. They just kind of walking around looking at the mall. And they get all the way around, and coming around the last corner and that last little straightaway, they turn it on and they sprint like, oh, they just give it all. And then to get through fall down on their face, throwing up and all kinds of good stuff. But it took them 25 minutes to get there. Paul is saying that's uncertainty. You're running like you don't know what you're doing. We've got some kids that have really good form. You know, they keep good and tight and they run good. And then you got folks that are like flailing their arms and stumbling around and just, you know, they're running uncertainly. You wonder if they're going to trip or if they're going to make, you know, or they're stepping around their shoestrings. That's running uncertainly. You could look at any discipline like that. Are you doing it because you know what you're doing and you know how to do it right? Or are you just kind of going out here, whoo, laissez-faire, let's go. This looks fun. No, let's do that. He also talks about, and I fight, not as one that beateth the air. I don't know if you've seen some of these welterweight boxing matches. It looks like 2 windmills having at it out there, and nobody's connecting with anything. They may as well be facing away from each other and just slinging arms. Shadow boxing, if you will. Paul says, that's not me. I'm not doing it like that. Everything I'm doing is intentional. And he's using something the Corinthians understand. Because they were big sports fans. You think the Super Bowl was something. Man, you get out there to the Olympics, there you go. Verse 27, he goes on to say, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Hey lady, how you doing? It's awful good to see y'all today. So he's saying this, I keep under my body. I discipline myself. My body does not control, the urges of my body does not control the actions of my mind. My body does what I tell it to do because I have trained it to do that. I understand what my body can do because I have trained it. I understand what my mental can do because we have trained it. I saw a little thing in here that I want to kind of close out with a few little sayings. One does not meander into heaven by accident. You don't accidentally make it to heaven. Nor does one shadowbox his way into heaven, having never actually fought the good fight or kept the faith. You can shadowbox all day long and you can be an undefeated champion until you step in the ring. Christian life requires a clear sense of purpose. You don't accidentally get into heaven. I train, Paul says, I discipline my body and my mind. I train mentally to focus on Jesus' calling for me. I don't get distracted by the lesser things. I study the Scripture. I pray without ceasing. At no time do I allow myself to take a cheat day. Any of y'all ever been training for something and you say, okay, this is a cheat day. I get to eat today. I get to do whatever today. This is my cheat day. Paul says, no, you don't get a cheat day. Every day should be better than the one yesterday. I tell the kids that we're working on push-ups. If you can do one more today than you did yesterday, that's a success. If you do one more tomorrow than you did today, you're successful. Paul says, I have preached to others. Let's see. When I have preached to others, that I myself should be a castaway. He's not saying that when I preach, I lose my salvation. I may lose my salvation if I don't preach it right. That's not what he's saying. Paul understood the doctrine. You are saved once and for all. He's saying is, he's not saying he's afraid of being rejected by God at the judgment. He's saying that he should be second best. When I preach, I don't want somebody to look at me and say, man, he was almost as good as Solomon. Man, he was just about as good as Brother Tom. He wants to be, remember his analogy here, you're either the winner or you're not. You're either top dog or you're not. And he don't want to be second best. He wants to do all things to the best of his ability for God. Saving faith, and I'm going to close with this little thought here. Saving faith is a continuing, active faith. It doesn't rest smugly on one instance from the past, but it embraces the future as a ground for continued obedience. The Christian life is not one of indulging, but of exacting. It comes with a price. Salvation is not an invitation to complacency, but a summons to commitment. Your salvation doesn't mean that you get to sit down now. Your salvation is the beginning. Now the commitment takes hold. Every new day is that summons to a new commitment. One better today than you were yesterday. That's what God gave me this week. Does anybody have anything you'd like to add to that?